Today you're joining me on the banks once again of Shearwater, which is in Warminster, and this place has been shut as a fishery for a couple of years for one reason or another, but it's finally back open and bookable on the Catch app. So for those of you that watch these videos and are local to me and you didn't already know, Shearwater is now back open on the Catch app. So that's a great bit of news. But with me today are the new Prodigy rods from Greys. I've done quite a few videos on Greys rods before, namely the X Flights, and I've always got on really well with them and the premium products and show in the usage of them. So these new Prodigies are something I've not seen before. They are brand new, so I'm looking forward to actually putting them through their paces. Now before I jump into these, please do make sure you are subscribed to us and hit the bell icon if you haven't done so already, so you don't miss any future uploads, and also follow us on all the different social media platforms coming up on your screen right now. Now you're probably looking at my setup thinking that looks pretty wonky, and you'd be correct in saying that, because I've been sent three completely different rods from the range of Prodigy from Greys. So you've got ranging from 10 foot all the way up to 13 foot distance ones. So you give me a selection of different rods for this session. The rod on your left is a 12 foot 3.5 pounds, so more geared towards slightly larger distances, but not as ramped up as the 13 footers in the range. To its right, so this rod closest to me, is the 10 foot 3.25, so much more akin to smaller venues, but still able to cast decent distances, and I'll get onto those in a bit more detail in a second. And third and finally, they sent out their distance Spod Rod. So this is a 12 foot 6 rod. Not sure of the exact test curve, but it's pretty beefy, and because it's slightly extra length as well, it's not all the way up to a 13 foot, but that little extra 6 inches should help with distance casting. Now these rods are actually fishing for me right now, so I'm going to take you all the way back to the start of the session and go through each rod individually, starting off with the Spod Rod. So I found a nice little spot where I think I'm going to fish for the morning and into the early afternoon, about 15 wraps. Of course, that's not a big test for this rod. Now, this is the Spod Mark. It's a 12 foot 6 distance spod. So of course, 15 wraps isn't putting it through its paces. So before I clip back up to 15, start putting a few spoms of flake out on that spot, I just want to give it a few blasts down the lake. I'm nowhere near anyone else, so I'm not inhibiting everyone else's fishing. And I've just loaded the spom up again. Well, I'm using the Wolf X Spod, and I've just loaded it up completely with boilie flake and then sunk it in the margin so it soaks up all the water. So everything in there is really heavy. You do one cast with it really heavy like this, and another one just of the boilie flake with no water content, just to see how it performs when you fully load it up, or if you have it slightly lighter. So straight towards the far bay. Oh, felt like it compressed all right. And there we are, I hit the water. Say probably 110. So for me, obviously that's a good distance. In the right hands, much further. Someone not as capable as me, which there probably aren't many of, you'd still easily hit 100 yards after a few casts, but fully loaded up with a really heavy spod, that just went, I guess it, around the 110 mark. So I'm just gonna do one more test with boilie flake with no moisture content, so it's not gonna get all sodden and heavy, and see how far I can get it when it's not quite as heavy and not having to compress the rod as much as I did then. So I'll just quickly load it up with some flake, so I can feel that's a lot lighter. I wonder if it's going to go as far, not as far, or further. So let's get the knot in the same place as before, so everything's the same. There we go. Exactly the same technique. Okay, that felt easier. And I'd say probably about 10 yards further, so not as heavy. I was able to get a bit further. That was probably more the 120 mark, and it felt easier to do, but not a huge difference considering there's probably an ounce or ounce and a half difference between spod weights from the first one to the second one. I'll get a few slow-mo shots of the cast just to see how much it compressed. All the slow-mo shots I get will be when it's fully compressed with the heaviest amount in the spod, and you'll see how it performs. But it seems to recover really quickly. It's nice balance. The 12 foot 6, you really do notice that extra 6 inches, no comment, when you're using it at sort of its capacity range. I don't know why I say my capacity range for this is about that sort of distance. In the right conditions, in the right hands, you'd easily go far further than that. But that little just addition, because it's such a stiff rod, means you're able to compress it that little bit easier, rather than if it was as stiff as it is, but only 12 foot, which a lot of spod rods are, you might struggle to compress it a bit more. So that little extra does help. And that's the same as when you get rods that go up to the 13 foots and that, but they're really strong test curves. You'll find you can still compress a bit better because there's just that more leverage. So I'm going to clip this back up at 15, do a few spods at a really comfortable range, and then I'm going to get the two different rods out that I've got with me today. One's a 12 foot 3.5, and the other one is a 10 foot 325, I believe, that I've been sent out from Greys. So yeah, that was the Prodigy 12 foot 6 distance spod. Let's get some bait out and then get the rigs out. So I've got about 6 or 7 spods on the spot now. It's very nearly December. I think tomorrow's December the 1st actually. So it's starting to get colder now. The last few nights have been pretty cold. So I'm going to start tailing off my baiting approach going into the colder weather now. But it's been fairly mild up until this point, very, very mild November, which is why I've put a bit of spod out there to start with. And the fact this place only opened about a week ago, if that. So it hasn't seen much angling pressure for a very long time and probably not much bait. So I'm hoping the fish are still hungry. There's a good stock in here. So that's just going to get them going. And that's probably been sitting about 15-20 minutes already, and I'm just going to get these rods clipped up and out on the spot shortly, but that's going to be sitting there hopefully getting the fish interested before I put some rigs out. But moving on to the actual rods I'm going to be fishing with today, I've got 2 different rods with me. I've got the 12 foot 3.5 pound test curve, which is in my hand, and then I've got a 10 footer, which I'm going to test in a second. But before I clip this up at 15 wraps, put it out on the spot, I'm going to use this and just see how far I can cast. Now, I do know that the hindrance on this setup is going to be the reel. This is the reels I use on my retractable rods back at home. So they are going to be the hindrance in this. They're not a big pits distance casting rods, which is predominantly what this rod's going to be for, fishing at more range. But we'll see how it copes with a moderately sized reel. 15 pound mono straight through. Then I've got about a metre or just under a metre of heavy tungsten tubing, lead clip, 4 ounce lead, and a rig. So it's a full complete setup. It's not just a lead with a shock leader, see how far I can cast. It's an actual fishing situation with the reel being the hindrance on this, I reckon. But we'll give it a try. I'm going to cast it the same direction I did with the spod a second ago. Oh, lovely whip. Cast pretty well. So considering this reel is going to be what's holding it back, I'd say that was around the 120 mark. First or second cast. I've done a cast for the slow-mo as well. So very impressive actually for how far that's gone with a reel of this size. So if you set this up with an actual balance setup, with a decent sized reel, you're easily hitting 140, 150 for me anyway, if I had a decent reel on me. But for those with decent casting capabilities, you'd probably go even further than that. So it's a perfect pairing with the spod rod that they send out to me, because that's the spod or distance spod, and I was hitting about the same distance with a fully loaded X spod as I am with a fully loaded baited up rig with tubing and everything. So for an actual fishing situation, not just bare lead with straight through thin line, fishing distance, I would confidently and comfortably fish at 110, pushing 120 with that setup if I was to use a set of 3 of these rods on these conditions with my casting capabilities. Of course, it's all very relative. If you're a decent caster, you'll get more out of these rods. There's probably a lot more reserve in them than what I've just shown, but quite impressive. I'm going to get this wrapped up at 15, out on the spot, so we've at least got 1 rod fishing, and then we'll move on to the next rod. We are now fishing with 1 rod at least, and the second rod that I've got with me today that I'm going to be actually fishing with is the 10 foot 3.25 pound test curve. And one of the things you'll probably notice straight away is that this has a 50mm butt ring. So the ringing pattern is actually quite large. It's pretty much the same as what I've got on the 12 foot, which suggests that this is still capable of fishing at greater distances, despite the fact it's a 10 foot, which is a bit more akin to smaller venues, stalking, things like that. So before I clip it out at 15, once again, I'm going to give it a few casts at range, see how it fares. Same setup with a 15 pound line, same size reel, got tubing, 3.5 ounce lead, I think this one is, a rig. So complete fishing setup. This is exactly what you'd expect to be casting out. So let's see how it fares. Now, first thing I noticed is the handle is a lot smaller. It's, if you have a look next to me, it's probably a good 5 inches until it reaches the crook of my armpit, which obviously with a distance casting rod, you expect it to be pretty much full length of your arm. So it's a bit shorter, but that might mean I'm able to pull it into my chest a bit easier. Oh, that really whips. I'd say You're looking around the 90-yard mark there, so quite a bit shy of what I was getting with the 12, which is understandable. But still hit that distance pretty easily for my third cast of the day with this rod. So really quite impressive. I think the differences with this is you've got to time the release a little bit better. I think I let it go a little bit too late that time, so it launched a bit too low. So I will just have one more crack with it like this before I clip it up at 15 and get it fishing. Because hopefully I want to put these rods through the test of actually playing a fish as well. So same as before, lock solid, lead's back at the spigot. That's better. Okay, easily another 10 yards or so. So I'm close to the 100-yard mark there with a 10-foot rod. So it's clearly beef enough. And this is only 3¼ pound, remember? So it's not really stiff for a 10-foot rod. It's got a lovely progressive curve from what I can see from reeling in. I'm sure playing a fish would be lovely as well. But the fact it's got the 50mm butt ring and quite large rings for the size of the rod means that line resistance isn't going to be what holds it back from reaching greater distances. The thing that will is casting ability, the line and reel that you're using, of course, which is what's holding me back a bit today, and what you've got down the other end. But that shows you can reach 100 yards fairly comfortably with a full baited rig setup. So if you want to go down to a 10-foot rod setup, maybe get rid of your 12-foots and use 10s, which fish a whole manner of places, even up to that sort of range, then you could probably quite comfortably replace your 12-foots with a 10-foot 3¼ Lovely. So lastly, get this wrapped out at 15 and get it fishing. And that brings us up to speed to where we are now, where these two rods have been fishing for me for unfortunately about an hour and a half, and they've not done so much as a beep. So I'm not sure if I'm in the right position, because I am in the shallower end of the lake, and I do think I'm fishing about 5 foot of water. It does go quite a bit deeper down towards the dam wall, but it is what it is. I wanted to be away from everyone else while I was doing loads of casts. So that's on me if they don't go off. But I do want to show you how they play fish, because I want to learn myself. If it doesn't happen though, apologies on that front. But I will talk to you more about the actual specs and what these rods are built of. So the blanks themselves are made of a 36T carbon, and then all the way up the rods you've got Sea Guide minima guides. And as I mentioned when I was casting the 10-foot rod, that has a 50mm, that has a 50mm butt ring. So the ring impact is actually quite large for the 10-foots. That's the same on all the models, the Sea Guide minimas. Then we go down to the reel seats, which is a Sea Guide aluminium DAPS reel seat. I think that's the correct name. And these are beautiful. They're quite understated to start with, then you look down to where the actual thread is. And the only way I can describe it is if you've ever seen diamond cut alloys, where you've got the nice painted sections which goes into the wheel, but the actual front face of the wheel has been machined to be diamond cut and looks just perfectly smooth metal. That's the only way I can describe how they look. There's a really nice contrast between the black of the main bulk of the reel seat, and then the actual thread itself looks as though it's been machined like a diamond cut alloy. They look absolutely beautiful. And then we've got a full Japanese shrink wrap handle with a fluted end. They feel lovely in the hand. And as you can see from probably that camera, or I'll get another shot as well, the handle length difference is of course different when you've got the 10-foot or the 12 and the Spod rods. So they are all relative to what they're going to be mainly used for, but the actual finish of them is the same. And that's really, really nice. Then you've got carbon detailing all up. You've just got gloss black on the whippings for the eyes, on the spigot. So overall, the actual blanks themselves are more of a grey finish, I'd say. So you've got grey, then you've got the gloss black on the whippings, and then there's a little section between the reel seat and the grey, where it starts here, which is more of an exposed carbon. That's where the detailing for the Prodigy and the actual rod itself, the Greys logo. And then all the way at the bottom, we've got a Greys end cap as well. So they're very smart looking rods, much like the X-Flights I've done before. You can tell they're a higher end quality product. The X-Flights have that little whip of red on them, which I really like. These don't have anything like that, but Greys have still introduced a little flare of something different on them, which is what I was referring to with the thread of the reel seats, which on the whole, I think is my favorite part of the whole rods. I haven't really seen it on anything else before. I'm not a big fan of metal reel seats. So the fact that the bulk of it is plastic, but that thread is exposed like that, is really, really nice. Let me know in the comment section below what your favorite part of these rods are, and it'd be interesting to know. But if you've seen that before, let us know as well. If not, do you like them? Now I'm hoping I slipped in a few of those keywords and phrases to give you an idea of the price point before I tell you, like refined, higher end, bespoke, Those are the sort of words you use when you are talking about a more premium product. There's no two ways about it. These aren't budget rods, they are more premium, and that is reflected in the price. So if I go from the Spod Rod to start with, you're looking at $249.99. These prices are direct from the Greys website as of the point of filming. So $249.99 on the distance Spod Rod. The 12-foot 3.5 is around $194.99, and then the 10-foot, depending on what one you go for, you're looking around the $160 to $180 mark on the 10-foot rods. So those are the prices for the Prodigy rods. I hope that gives you enough of an idea of what's in the range. There's a few others of the 10-foots all the way up to 13-foot 3.5s and things for distance fishing. So this is just a bit of a selection of what is available in the range. But if you like the look of them, then you want to find some rods that are more suited to your fishing, then there should be something in the range for you. So please like the video if you did, and hit the bell icon if you haven't done so already. Do head over to the Greys website if you want some more information on these, or find a stockist or whatever. But that's it for me for now. I'm going to leave you to it and leave them until very last. I don't want to blank on my first trip back to Shearwater. It's being there that counts. Repeat, it's being there that counts. Repeat, it's being there that counts. Catching's a bonus.